It's late. You have to give that big presentation at work tomorrow, but just like always, you've been slacking off, and you're once again scrambling to get everything done at the last minute. You promised you would leave this behavior behind in college, but now it's followed you into your adult life. You're almost done though. You just need a graphic to accompany one of the closing slides. We even already have the perfect image. The problem is, the quality is extremely poor. It looks like some cached photo from a Google image preview. You search the internet for an alternative, but there's nothing better than that low-res digicam looking image. You may need to work with what you got. Maybe there's some software you can use to touch it up a little bit. A quick Google search reveals that there is. It just costs a lot of money. You're not going to spend all your hard-earned cash on a program that you're only going to use one time. That would be foolish. It's time to sail the high seas. The prospect of exploring these digital black markets may seem like a daunting idea to some, but not to you. You're a seasoned veteran of these shady online back alleys. You know that all you have to do is find an upload put up by a trusted user. You settle on what seems to be the right choice, an upload that has a ton of seeders posted by a name you recognize. You hit download and you wait for the files to manifest onto your computer. Within minutes, you're almost done installing the program. But then, something unexpected happens. The screen suddenly goes black. You press the power button and start hitting random keys, but nothing seems to have any effect. You decide to do a hard restart, and the BIOS screen does pop up. But what comes after makes your heart sink.
Your data have been encrypted.
Instead of the Windows login screen, you're greeted with a 2010s DeviantArt creepypasta bunny smiling menacingly at you. It's surrounded by red text written in poor English explaining that all the data on your computer has been locked, and the only way you can get any of it back is to send $1,000 in crypto to a specific address within 24 hours. If you fail to do so in time, the virus will permanently delete some of your files and the ransom will double. You sit there stunned for a few seconds, not quite absorbing the magnitude of what just happened. You restart your computer again, but the same screen pops up. As you're still trying to process it all, a notification pops up on your phone. It's an email from yourself. In it is a list of accounts you have on different websites, along with the 3 or 4 different passwords that you use for all of them. It's in this moment that you realize you are well and truly fucked. While the story was obviously embellished, it's not fiction. In 2019, a popular uploader on various piracy websites known as CracksNow would all but be banned from the Wares community after he was caught bundling a sinister piece of malware into his uploads, one that was called GandCrab. This ransomware was first discovered in 2018 and is a surprisingly slick tool sold by Russian hackers on the dark web. Software as a service is a trend that has even found its way to cybercrime, as GandCrab almost functions like a restaurant franchise. The developers supply you with free technical support and a web dashboard to monitor your victims, and all you have to do is pay the developers a third of the money you steal. Once GandCrab successfully worms its way into your computer, it immediately locks it down, encrypting all of your files. It then shows the user one of a few different screens, all of which are designed to not only communicate the direness of the situation, but also to strike a bit of fear, using horror imagery. In 2019, open source Intel analysts would start noticing a strain of GandCrab floating around that had a tool called VIDAR bundled into it. VIDAR is another off-the-shelf malware, but it's not ransomware. This virus will search through your computer and gather all the sensitive data it can find, including online account information, two-factor authentication info, crypto wallets, and any sensitive private documents. This adds a way for cybercriminals to get a bit of money even if their victim doesn't pay the ransom to unlock their computer, and it adds other attack vectors as well, such as blackmail or straight-up identity theft. In 2019 alone, it was found that up to 50,000 computers in Europe may have been infected with GandCrab, and the ransom amount varied between $400 to $700,000. That might seem like a ridiculous number, but you have to keep in mind just how important some computers are. For example, an employee working for San Francisco's public transportation decided to sail the high seas while at work one evening, just before Thanksgiving in 2016. They downloaded what they thought was a legit upload claiming to offer paid software for free, but during the installation process, they realized that they had accidentally opened a virus. It wasn't GandCrab, but it was a similar piece of ransomware, one that almost immediately gained access to a quarter of all computer systems owned by San Francisco's public transit, and locked them all down. The virus then asked the employee for $73,000 worth of Bitcoin, or else it would permanently wipe the drives of the 2,000 computers it had infected. It's not known whether or not the city of San Francisco paid the ransom, but in any event, they would state that the situation had been contained only a few days after it started. But the whole time the ransomware was active, every ticket terminal in San Francisco was out of order, which led to the rioters getting an unplanned Black Friday deal in the form of free rides. Downloading ransomware is just one risk you face while browsing the seedy world of piracy websites. Even if you think you know what you're doing, this is still a largely lawless corner of cyberspace. Don't get me wrong, the people who run these websites do put an effort to moderate them, but it's kind of like an honor among thieves, which is just a comforting guise obscuring what's essentially the law of the jungle. With the whole premise of these platforms being illegal, the people who run and contribute to them try to keep their identities and activities completely private. So even if you do trust an uploader, you still have no idea who they actually are and what their motivations may be. And even if the contributors to these platforms are just simply trying to give people access to free versions of paid software, sometimes even that can go wrong. Back in 2019, while GandCrab was infecting thousands of computers, somebody would quietly sneak in another piece of malware onto the bay. This one almost seems stupid in retrospect. During the installation process for whatever piece of software this virus was attached to, a login screen would eventually pop up. It would prompt the user to authenticate their account information because it apparently needed to make sure that the person installing the program was a human, which doesn't actually make any sense, but regardless, this malware was incredibly successful, and many prolific uploaders would have their accounts stolen. The hackers behind the virus would then quietly sneak in infected files into the uploads posted by those accounts, spreading the malware far and wide using the identities of long-established and well-trusted uploaders. After stealing login credentials, Pirate Matryoshka, the name of the virus, would then infect the user's computer with unwanted cleaning programs, browser toolbars, and ads would suddenly start popping up everywhere, which is typical of adware. The world of online piracy is one of lawlessness and chaos, both for the people who participate in it and the companies who claim to be fighting it. It's also a thriving underground art scene, one that's had an indirect but incalculable effect on modern culture. And yet, for how significant this side of the internet is, you very rarely see people talking about it. So today, we're going to go through a few key sagas from the world of online piracy, which are all incredibly bizarre. But before we get to the next one, we have to go over a little bit of history. You may have noticed I've been referring to a specific site a few times in this video, but I haven't actually mentioned it by name yet. The Pirate Bay, a platform that's long been the face of modern online piracy. When it first started in 2003, it almost immediately became the most popular place on the internet to find something called wares, which is a word that refers to any sort of copyrighted media that you can obtain through piracy communities on the internet. The reason for the platform's success was its simplicity. Other online repositories for wares at the time had complicated forum-like interfaces and weren't user-friendly. And on top of that, many of them were invite-only. You couldn't access them unless you found a way to get an account, which could be through knowing an existing member, or if you just happened to visit the site during a sign-up period. The Pirate Bay, on the other hand, was 100% publicly browsable, and the site only really had two sections: a search screen and a categories view, which lets you browse the top uploads in any given section. You can really tell they just copied Google's design almost to a T, but clearly it worked. They actually haven't changed the design at all in 20 years. It's looked pretty much exactly the same since 2005. When downloading something from this site, you're not actually downloading the content itself. You're actually fetching something called a torrent file. You load this file into a client program, which will download the content you're after through peer-to-peer file sharing, which basically means you're downloading stuff off of other people's computers, not from a server. Torrents aren't just used in piracy websites, they're also an essential service for many legit organizations. Pretty much every Linux distribution will be served via torrents, and the Internet Archive is infinitely more useful when fetching their content through torrents rather than their painfully slow direct downloads. Torrents made running a piracy website really easy. Instead of spending a stupid amount of money on bandwidth to serve users stolen media, these sites could instead just host a tiny 100 kilobyte torrent files. You might also assume that not directly offering the pirated content themselves might offer some sort of legal protection to a site like the Pirate Bay, but you would be wrong. In 2006, the Pirate Bay would begin experiencing a never-ending slew of legal troubles. In May of that year, their headquarters would be raided by the Swedish police, which would cause the site to go offline for the first time. Multiple sources would allege that this raid was pressured into action by the Motion Picture Association of America, who had deemed the operation a success in its immediate aftermath, writing in a press release that the US and Swedish governments worked in tandem to shut this illegal website down. The thing is, a website like the Pirate Bay is pretty hard to keep offline. It's a very simple service that doesn't host a ton of data. It wouldn't be very tricky to just mirror the entire site somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened. Only 3 days after the raid, the Pirate Bay would return to the internet, this time with a major hit of publicity from the mainstream news reporting on the police operation, which would lead to the site's traffic doubling. This is pretty much how it goes anytime the authorities have tried to do something about the Pirate Bay. The website will end up going offline only for a laughably short period of time, and upon its return, it ends up getting more traffic than before because of all the free publicity. While the veracity of the legal action taken against the site has only ramped up over the years, the efforts to mirror it has also only gotten more effective. In 2014, a tool called the Open Bay would launch, which would let users deploy their own copies of the Pirate Bay to the internet, which led to 372 different mirrors being launched. It's clear the Pirate Bay isn't going away, no matter what the powers that be may try. That was a realization that dawned on a few different large media companies sometime in the 2000s. So they would try an alternative method to deal with internet pirates, one that was much more shady, and would later lead to an FBI investigation after internet sleuths performed their own. While the Pirate Bay was reveling in its surge in popularity, some of its users would begin reporting some strange problems. It wasn't anything to do with the site itself, however. It was the torrents. It wasn't some alarmist ransomware or any kind of virus at all, really. It was just odd little issues. Maybe you downloaded a movie, but when you clicked on it, you were met with an unsettling screen of static accompanied by loud screeching. Maybe you burned a disc and it caused your DVD player to freak out. Maybe you tried to play an MP3 and it unexplainably broke your Windows installation, which caused you to lose all your files. The motivations behind computer viruses are pretty clear. There's always something they're trying to get, whether it's money, private information, or access to your computer's resources. But this was different. There was no inherent motive here, just random, senseless acts of inconvenience. Online detectives would start investigating these reoccurring issues, but it was hard to track down exactly what was happening. The torrents serving these broken files all seemed to be mostly seeded from machines with similar IP ranges that all came from California and Nevada. Weird. In 2007, journalist Ernesto van der Sar would collect this information, and with it, he'd form a conclusion. His theory was that there was some consolidated effort from anti-piracy organizations, likely funded by large media companies, to poison torrents with fake and possibly dangerous data. Basically, big money was trying to sabotage piracy websites using low-stakes cyber terrorism. It definitely seemed a little far-fetched, and at the time of this article, it was just a theory and nothing more. But time would only give it more credence. Later that year, Ernesto would once again write another article, this time reporting on a new piracy site that popped up, called Mevi.com. It was another torrent site that claimed to offer guaranteed high-speed downloads and uploads using a proprietary client that they offered. Any user who signed up and used the site, though, would later receive a cease and desist letter in the mail from their internet service provider. Ernesto would do his own investigation, and he'd find that the Mevi domain name was registered by a company called Media Defender, an anti-piracy organization funded by major media companies like Universal and 20th Century Fox. The same day Ernesto published his findings, the site would disappear from the internet. Online investigators now had a better idea as to who was behind all this havoc wreaking on the Pirate Bay and the piracy community as a whole. They'd start looking at Media Defender more closely, and just a couple months later, a bombshell would be dropped. A high school student going by Ethan, a fake name, had hacked into Media Defender's servers, exploiting a weakness in the company's firewall. One particular employee of the company had been forwarding all his work emails to a personal Gmail account, which Ethan and his buddies were able to gain access to. They would then leak a total of 6,000 emails that outlined everything this shady company had been up to. Remember that virus we talked about that would steal Pirate Bay logins and then use stolen accounts to spread malware? Well, believe it or not, that's exactly what Media Defender had been doing. Their Mevi client was a virus that would use your computer to upload poison torrents to various piracy sites, effectively creating a bot network solely made up of unwilling participants. It was also revealed that not only was Media Defender responsible for spreading around all these fake torrents that were damaging people's computers, but the large companies that had contracted them, like Sony, knew full well the shady tactics they were using, and they were fine with it. In an almost comically evil response to these leaks, Media Defender would begin DDoSing any organization who dared share around any of the revelations. If you don't know what that is, DDoSing is when you repeatedly make requests to an online service from many machines in an attempt to overwhelm the network and shut it down. It's a low-skill and unsophisticated method of cybercrime. It's the digital equivalent of winning a fight by throwing a sucker punch. These cheap DDoSing campaigns would end up being Media Defender's downfall. The platforms they were attacking often weren't directly hosting any of the leaked emails, and on top of that, DDoSing is just flat out illegal no matter who's doing it. In 2008, they would DDoS Revision 3, an internet platform owned by the Discovery Channel, which would result in Media Defender being investigated by the FBI. That combined with all the other controversies would cause their stock value to tank, and the company would be defunct just a year later. Oh, I should probably mention that they were also sued by the Pirate Bay, which is kind of funny. I understand why a company wouldn't want people spreading around their intellectual property for free. But if that same business breaks the law in multiple ways to combat it, it doesn't really make them any better than the pirates. You can see why I said earlier that piracy websites are full of chaos and lawlessness, and it's not just isolated to the people who use them. We use the word piracy for a reason. It harkens back to the 1700s when huge companies were fighting real pirates using similarly shady and illegal tactics. Media Defender's ultimate goal was to create a bot network of zombie computers that would be flooding torrent websites with fake and damaging data. While they didn't succeed in that, somebody would. And they certainly weren't anti-piracy advocates. Oddly enough, our next story brings us off of the Pirate Bay and onto YouTube. It's a classic story. You search YouTube hoping to find a video that'll help you obtain some paid software for free. Every upload in this weird niche follows the same format. Somebody will be screen recording their desktop and they'll communicate with the viewer by typing in stuff on Notepad. Maybe there's a Linkin Park song playing in the background and some Windows Movie Maker title spattered about. You know exactly what this kind of video was like. Old school YouTube tech tutorials are definitely a very specific thing, and piracy tutorials are kind of like the shady side of this niche. These videos never really have many views, likely because the popular ones got taken down for breaking YouTube's guidelines. They always seem to direct you to a Mediafire link of some kind. Obviously, when looking at these videos more than a decade later, you'll find all the links are now dead, so it's hard to say whether these uploads were trying to spread around viruses or not. I do think some of them were genuine, like this guy, DevilCache8, who literally made tutorials on how to download torrents from the Pirate Bay, always accompanied by a Disturbed or Avenged Sevenfold song. There did seem to be a community of younger people sharing around software they obtained from torrent websites through YouTube, but it wouldn't be terribly far-fetched to assume that there were some bad actors using this unconventional piracy method to spread around malware. And indeed, we would eventually see that theory come to fruition in a big way. But not in 2010 or in 2013, no. In 2025, security researchers would uncover a large network of bot YouTube accounts spreading around malware using fake pirated software. They discovered a total of 3,000 videos uploaded by accounts that were either brand new or existing channels that were hijacked. They were usually advertising a cracked version of Photoshop or Roblox hacks. According to the article, the descriptions in these videos would contain a link to Mediafire or a Dropbox, which is where the user would ultimately download the malware. The comment sections in these videos would be filled with fake testimonials from other accounts that had been uploading the same videos advertising the same virus, which the article notes was called Luma Stealer, another virus that can scan your drive for sensitive private information to steal. The researchers know that YouTube actually did take action and they removed all the channels and videos that belonged to this dead internet network. But I wanted to see if there's still anything like that on the platform. I had a feeling that this likely wasn't an isolated case, and indeed, it wouldn't take me very long to find a bot network very similar to the one described in this article. Doing a simple search and filtering by recently uploaded would show me a bunch of playlists that appeared to all contain the same set of videos. One of the uploads here is simply titled 2026 and features a gyrating 2026 title slide accompanied by upbeat dance music. In the comments, a YouTube post is linked, along with the password. We'll get to that in a minute. Another video is called Photoshop 2026, and this one's actually much stranger. The entire clip is just a bunch of blurry nonsense, as if you were staring at strobe lights with your eyes closed. The comments are filled with people thanking the uploader, and again, a YouTube post is linked here, the same one from the other video. There's several other uploads in this playlist, all are equally strange. Some only have 30 views, some have 12,000. All of them though have the same YouTube post linked in the description and in the comments. The post simply contains a link to a Mediafire folder, which itself has 2 files. winrar.exe, and launcherinstaller.rar. We're not going to be downloading those. There is also another site linked on this post, which is called gratisexpert.com. It's a dead link, but we can't see what the site once looked like using the Wayback Machine. It was advertising something called Career Boost Solutions, a Spanish resume writing service. I don't really understand why this is linked on this post, and also why this site is now dead. It appears to have been blocked through Cloudflare in some way, so maybe the site was doing something shady, but I guess we're not going to find out. The channel that made the YouTube post with the Mediafire link seems to be a Spanish language DJ. They have almost 7,000 subs and appear to be a fairly active YouTuber posting their original music up until around a year ago. The post with the Mediafire link was made 4 months ago. The channel that posted that weird blurry video is called Mundo Interesante. Apologies in advance for my horrible Spanish pronunciation. This guy has almost 2,000 subs, and for the last month or so, they've been posting nothing but videos about how to illegally obtain paid software. While the Photoshop video was nothing but a blurry mess, his Illustrator one starts off blurry for the first 30 seconds, but then switches to what seems to be a tutorial for the program. Again, a YouTube post is linked down below. This one is from a different DJ account, but the post is exactly the same. In fact, it's even the same Mediafire folder linked on the Photoshop post, even though it's intended for a different program. That tells me that this is 100% a piece of malware masquerading as various pieces of software. The DJ who made the Illustrator post is the largest account we've seen so far. He's got 44,000 subs with multiple videos over 1 million views. His most viewed upload has 24 million views, but again, he hasn't been active in more than a year. Except for this YouTube post, which was made only 2 weeks ago. Believe it or not, this isn't even the biggest YouTube account in this network. One of the videos in this weird playlist is simply titled Video in all caps, and it also features a gyrating 2026 clip art. It was posted by Matthias Herber, who has 106,000 subscribers. Yet if we go to his channel page, this video is the only piece of content there. Obviously, to gain 100,000 subs, there must have been plenty of other content here at one point in time, which is also suggested by the custom channel banner that's still there. But clearly, somebody went in and raised this channel at some point. The final piece of this bizarre puzzle is the owner of the playlist, whose name seems to be Pastor Moises Bell. This is where things really go off the deep end, as this channel has a whopping 500,000 subscribers, more than I have. It's also an active account, with the last video being uploaded just over a week ago. Almost everything here appears to be recordings of Spanish language Pentecostal church sermons in some huge American megachurch, which is definitely an odd sight for my Canadian Catholic eyes. That's not really important here though. If we browse over to the playlist tab, you'll be greeted with an endless list of duplicate playlists just like the Photoshop one we were just investigating. This may seem like a ton of content, but every single video in all of these playlists seem to link back to one of those 2 YouTube posts by the 2 DJs. I think it would be safe to assume that this pastor had his YouTube account hacked, but it's very weird that he's still uploading at the same time all these new playlists are appearing on his channel. It's likely he just doesn't run it himself and whoever is in charge just isn't keeping a close eye on it. That's my guess anyways. I think every single account here was hacked at some point. Whoever's in charge of this bot network is likely using the exposure of a 500,000 sub YouTube account to elevate the presence of these playlists in search results. They're likely not uploading anything directly to the pastor's channel since it's still active and obviously somebody would notice at that point. I feel like if we were to look a little more, we'd probably find more examples of dead internet malware networks like this. And with the advent of AI tools that are likely automating this whole process to a certain extent, I'm not exactly sure how platforms like YouTube are going to consistently deal with problems like this long term. But I don't feel like talking about AI or depressing internet futures, so for our last topic, we're going to roll the clock back a few years, to a more simple time. Before torrents took over as the main avenue of internet piracy, there was a different peer-to-peer service that people used. No, not that one. This one. LimeWire. If you're a younger millennial or an older Gen Z, you likely used LimeWire to download something at some point in the 2000s. Maybe it was a T-Pain song or an episode of Lost, or maybe you used LimeWire to download LimeWire Pro. It was that piece of software you learned about from a friend, and you probably felt like a pro hacker when you smuggled that first copyrighted piece of content onto your computer without paying a dime. LimeWire was sort of like a public index of files that you could copy from other people's computers. If you decide to give the program access to one of your folders, it would allow other people to browse it as if they were looking through a folder on their own computer. It was an evolution of the same idea that birthed Napster in the 90s. But by the time LimeWire came around, everybody had better and faster access to the internet, which meant people would use LimeWire to access a more varied assortment of file types, like movies and software, whereas Napster was almost solely used for MP3 files. More kinds of files meant more risks with LimeWire. With Napster, the most that could go wrong was running into fake MP3 files that are purposely mislabeled. Remember Media Defender? They would put audio files on Napster that only contained high-pitched screeching noises in a kinda lame attempt at cyber vigilantism that didn't really accomplish much. On LimeWire though, fake files posed many more potential problems. On the lighter side of things, it was a common trend to prank people with fake video files. You may have been expecting to download an episode of The Simpsons, but upon playing the file, you're instead met with Bill Clinton's famous denial of his affair with Monica Lewinsky. Sometimes though, these pranks could get very dark. In reality, you had no idea what you were actually downloading when using LimeWire. Some people found it funny to upload gore videos to the platform labeled as completely innocent content. There wasn't really a way to tell if a file was legit or not before you hit download. The only way was to actually fetch it and play it yourself. Combine this with the fact that criminals use LimeWire to exchange illegal material, often purposely mislabeling things as to not call too much attention to what they were doing, and suddenly, you have a problem of people accidentally downloading CSAM and other such illegal content. In 2010, police would storm into the residence of a 20-year-old Florida man named Adam. He would be arrested for having illegal content on his computer, but according to him, he had merely accidentally downloaded a video that was mislabeled and then immediately deleted it without opening it. It was CSAM though, so the police would throw him in jail while they searched for all his devices. After a thorough investigation, it would actually appear that Adam had been telling the truth. He hadn't searched for any sketchy keywords, and the video in question wasn't only mislabeled, it hadn't even been viewed. He never actually opened it. It didn't matter though, just the fact that it was on his computer at all was enough to charge him with possession, and he'd end up getting slapped with 30 months in prison and 15 years of probation just for accidentally downloading the wrong file on LimeWire. It makes sense for the police to take this sort of stuff very seriously, but considering I personally have memories of accidentally downloading shock videos on LimeWire, it's sort of scary to think that it could have permanently ruined my life just because I downloaded a file that I thought was something else. If there's a single takeaway you could extract from all these stories, it would be to simply be careful of what you're downloading from the internet, not just piracy websites. The best antivirus you'll ever have is your own intuition. You can absolutely learn how to see the various red flags that are usually surrounding viruses and other sketchy files before they even make their way into your downloads folder. And if you did end up infecting your computer with something nasty and you had to wipe your hard drive because of it, don't feel bad. It happens to all of us once or twice. Just consider it a learning experience. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Since you made it all the way to the end, you should consider subscribing, because it'll be telling YouTube to recommend you more videos like this one. You can also follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with me off YouTube. And I don't really talk about it often, but I've also got a Patreon. It's $5 a month and you'll get access to my Discord, all my content ad-free in the highest quality possible through Vimeo, and I've also got some exclusive videos there as well. You'll also sometimes get videos early depending on the situation. The link's in the description if you're interested. And last but not least, have a good night.